Hey guys, Voxide here, back with another After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial we take a look at how we can use Element 3D to sort of generate this energy field around a logo. So if you want to check out this exact project file, you can follow the link in the description of this video. Also, feel free to use this project as your intro or in your projects, however you want. Alright, so let's get started. I will make a new composition. Let's go for 720p and let's make this 10 seconds. Okay, and let's start off by creating a new background. So I'll just make a new solid and I will go to Effect, Generate, just make sort of like an interesting background over here using a ramp. Let's actually make this a little darker, and you can make your background however you want. Alright, so let's make a new layer and I will name this element logo. And we actually, so let's add element 3D to this layer. So we'll go to videocopilot, element, and the way element works is you need a mask or a path, and in this case I just have my logo layer over here, and in order to actually mask this logo out, let me just scale this. So what I can do with this logo, while having the layer selected, I can go to layer, auto trace, and I'll just leave the settings at their default state, and if I hit OK, you can kind of see if I turn on mask, it sort of traced a mask around our logo. So now we can actually use this layer to create our 3D logo. So I will turn this off, and in my element logo layer I can go to custom layers. I will go to custom text and masks and I will set this to be the first layer. So now if I go in my scene setup and I click on extrude, you can see it's taking our mask and it's creating a logo based off of it. Alright, let's go in our extrusion model and let's set the bevel copies to be 3. And now I want to grab each individual bevel copy and I just want to spread this out a bit. So I will go to bevel 1 and let's set the Z offset. And right now I'm just trying to spread them out just so we can see what's going on. And for our bevel 3 texture, I'll just offset the Z in the negative direction. And for my bevel 2, let's actually set the extrude to be higher for this one. So maybe something like this. Maybe this will work. Let's make sure there's no gaps between them. So going back to my bevel 1, just adjust Z offset. And this is fine for now, we can always go back and change it later. Alright, let's hit OK and we can start making our textures. So let's make a new composition. I will set this to be 1000 by 1000 and hit OK, and this will be actually our logo texture 1, and I will make a new solid. I will add generate, oh sorry, no, I will add a fractal noise to this. And what I want to do with this fractal noise layer is I will set the contrast to be 35 and let's add a fast blur to this, just sort of blur it out. And actually I want to increase the scale a bit, so we're sort of creating like a base noise map for our metal textures, and I can name this base. And now to add some detail to this, I will add a new layer. I will also add a fractal noise to this, and I want to set this to multiply. And let's see, for our settings, I will set this to be dynamic progressive. We'll set this to be no, actually I don't want this to be inverse, sorry. And I can set the opacity. If I press T on my keyboard, I can set the opacity to be maybe 10%. And let's see, maybe that's too low. Let's set 20. So you can see, oh, that's too much. Set this to 15. So you can see we're sort of creating just some little subtle detail with our fractal noise. and this will be our dark layer, and let's make a bright layer, and for this I will also use a fractal noise. We're gonna be using a lot of fractal noise, so let's set the bright layer to be screen, and let's set this to be also dynamic progressive. And if I solo this, I actually want this to be invert, so we're kind of creating this nice noise look. And I will set this to be maybe 30% opacity. Let's see, maybe that's a little too much. Let's try 20. Actually, I think 30 was just fine. So now we have a base noise map and some texture, some detail over it. And if I go back to my main comp, so let's actually rename this to be main comp. And now in my element layer, I can set up the logo texture. And actually I want to go to my project window, and I will just drop the texture that we've just created, so logo texture 1. I'll drop this into my composition. And actually, before we set up our textures, let's actually make our second logo texture. So I will make a new composition. Let's also set this to be 1000 by 1000. And let's add a new solid. Let's make our fractal. And for this, to sort of create this energy look, I will go for dynamic progressive invert. And I want to add a blur. Let's see, I want to add a vector blur to this, and I will set this amount to be maybe 8. So you can kind of see it's squeezing our noise a bit and creating sort of this sharper look that resembles energy a little more. So let's actually set the complexity for our noise to be 4 maybe, just so we get a smoother result with this. And what I can do now is I can add an adjustment layer. So I will go to layer, adjustment layer, and for this let's actually create some contrast maybe with a curves layer adjustment, sorry. And now I want to add some color to this using a tritone. Let's set this to be sort of like a blue maybe. We can always just go back and adjust this. Let's set the curves to be after our tritone. Let's modify this a bit, and let's actually set the transform for this. Let's drop the scale a bit just so we get a little more detail from this. So I think this looks fine for now. Let's go back in our main comp. Actually, this comp2 layer that we've just created, let's set the name to be logo texture 2. And now back in my main comp, I can also add this new comp that we've created. And for our element logo, we can import the texture. If I go to my custom layers and custom texture maps, I can set both of these texture layers, comps, sorry, that we've just created. So you have to set them in the custom textures map slots, the first 2 layers. And now back in my scene setup, I can actually select my bevel 1, and let's set the diffuse to be our first or actually logo texture 1. So you can see now we're kind of adding this texture onto it, onto our object. And I want to use the same texture for our bevel 3, so I'll just drag and drop this on our bevel 1. So you can kind of see now we're sort of creating our original look. And what I can do with this is actually, let's see, I don't think we have any reflections to this. Let's go to reflection and let's set the intensity to be 50%. So now we sort of have this reflection. It sort of behaves like a metal would. And for our bevel 2 texture, we will set this diffuse channel to be our logo texture 2 comp. You can see it affecting it. And for this, I want to so make sure this doesn't have any reflection, so set the intensity to 0. And what I want to do here is let's set the shininess to be 0. Let's increase the ambient a bit. Right, so this is a good starting point. I will hit OK here. Let's actually add our camera now. So I will go to camera, layer, new camera. Let's set the angle of view to 75. and I will just push this further just so we can sort of see what we're doing over here. Alright, so let's actually go back in our logo texture tool and let's set the scale even lower here just so we get even more detail. Let's set the complexity down and maybe increase the vector blur amount. I think this is fine. Let's increase the contrast a bit and let's actually increase our contrast from the curves adjustment, so maybe something like this. Let's also add a glow, so I'll go to stylize, glow, and I want this to be soft, to have a softer radius. And let's actually go to my original fractional noise layer, and for evolution I will alt and left click this stopwatch for evolution, and I want to set up an expression for this, so I will use time multiplied by 150, and this basically just creates some nice animation and just gives it a little more depth to the overall look. Right, so back in our main comp, now you can see it also affects our texture. I can kind of see the textures are not tiled properly, so back in my element layer I will go to my scene setup and let's actually see if we can sort of tile this better. So on bevel tool I will go all the way down. Let's see, let's actually try the material channel, so go all the way down. Actually not this one, let's go to extrusion model, and over here at the model surface and mapping, let's set the UV repeat, so adjust these values a bit, sort of so it maps properly. Right, so maybe something like this should be fine. And let's actually add a color correction curves to the overall look, so I will just increase the contrast a bit. And actually in my logo texture one, what I can do is add a adjustment layer, and let's go to color correction and use a tritone, and then I will set this to be sort of like desaturated blue, so we're sort of giving our metal just a slight blue tint. And now back in my main comp, you can see now it sort of has this blue tint around it, and we can go to my blue channel. Let's adjust these values a bit, maybe not increase the green, maybe the high values of our green. Let's create some more contrast. So this is fine, this is pretty close. You can adjust this as much as you want to create the result you're after. Alright, so that's it for our logo layer. Now let's see how we can actually create the energy field. So let's make a new layer. I will name this element field, and I will add a videocopilot element, and I will just solo this layer for now. And for my scene setup, I want to go to my primitives and just use a sphere for this. And right away for the material, I can set up some settings over here. So let's actually set the ambient to be like 10. Let's set the reflection intensity to be 0, so we don't want any reflections. And let's set the diffuse color to be white. And hit OK for now. This is fine for the time being. And I will unsolo this. And I want to try to match our new layer to sort of encapsulate our logo. So if I go to my group 1 particle look, I will increase the size for this sphere, just sort of so it fits our logo. And let's actually, before we do any changes, let's just create our energy texture. So I will make a new composition. I will make this 1500 by 1500. Let's name this composition energy texture. And I sort of want to do the same thing we did for our logo texture too. So I will just copy and paste these layers. And you can see because this composition is higher in scale, we just need to go to our solid settings. So with my solids selected, I can go to solid settings, and I will just click on make comp size. And now I can reposition this to be in the center, and let's actually set our adjustment layer to be above it. And we need to do the same thing for our adjustment layer. So make comp size and just reposition this so it's centered. So this will be a good starting point for our energy texture. And going back to my main comp, I will drop this energy texture into the comp and turn it off. And in my element field layer, I want to go to custom layers, custom textures and maps, and I will set this layer 1 to be energy texture. And now in my scene setup, I can access this new texture by going to my diffuse channel, and to load textures I will set this to be energy texture. Alright, so now we're sort of creating our energy field. And let's see this bright spot over here. We don't want any shininess, and also we don't want any specular. Alright, so we're kind of creating this flat look. And now if I hit OK and I set this to add, you can kind of see they're overlaying each other properly. Let's actually animate the camera a bit. So I will make a new keyframe at around second 5. Let's set this, let's actually reset this camera, and I'm just gonna use my camera controls to just sort of drag this out. So this is where I want the camera to end, so I will set the keyframe for the position over here. And now in the beginning of my timeline, I want to set a position for my camera, maybe something like this. So now we're kind of creating a nice camera animation. And I can see right away that the sphere is too small. But actually a better idea would be if I go in my element logo layer and I go in my group 1 particle look, and I set the particle size of the logo to be smaller, so it sort of fits inside the energy field. Right, so this is the look. Let's actually edit this texture. So I don't want this to be this bright. I can go in my curves. Actually, let's go in our factual layer and let's just kill the brightness of this a bit. So we're sort of creating this nice thin strands of energy. Now back in my main comp, let's actually make this a little, let's make the noise a little bigger. So maybe something like this. Let's see what other adjustments we can make here. I think this looks fine. This looks fine for now, so just maybe increase the brightness a bit. And going back in my main comp, I can set this element field. Let's actually add a new curves to this so we can get some live feedback of how this should look. So I'll just increase the contrast a bit using the RGB curve. Let's add a stylize glow. Actually, before our glow, I want to add a exposure effect to this. So color correction exposure, and I'll just place this on top of my glow. Let's increase the exposure a bit. So this is raising up our high tones. And now I can go to my glow and spread out the radius a bit. So now we're getting a much nicer result, and which is a lot closer to the original look. So with our element layer selected, I can go to element, and let's actually go to particle rotation. And I also want to create some particle rotation animation. I will use the Y coordinate for this. So I'm just gonna turn this energy field around, as you can see in the preview. So let's set a keyframe for 0, and let's set a keyframe over here and go to second 5. Let's actually just turn this sphere around and just create a little more animation, like so. And one final thing that we have to add to this layer is gonna be, you can kind of see we're having a rough, sort of like this hard edge around our sphere. and we can actually fix this sort of by using a distort and turbulent displace. So now we're sort of adding more displacement to this, and I want to set the size for this to be maybe 35. Set this to 25. Let's actually set this to 20, and let's set the amount maybe lower, maybe 40, maybe 35. I think this is this looks alright for now. And now I can just take this layer and I can just use opacity to fade it out towards our second 5. So we'll just set the keyframe and just sort of fade out our energy field. Right, so now if I duplicate this layer, and I'll just solo this layer for now, I can add a effect, blur and sharpen, and let's add a CC, radial fast blur, and I will set this to brightest, and you kind of see it sort of creates these nice rays that our energy field will be sort of emitting. And this is way too bright, so we can go to our exposure layer and just kill off our exposure a bit. Let's kill this even more, and let's actually see if how it looks with the glow turned off. So not much of a difference. Let's go in my original layer, let's go to exposure over here and also just sort of kill this exposure just a bit. Alright, so we're starting to get a much nicer result. And what just a final thing that we can do is we can add a new adjustment layer. So make sure this is on top of all the layers, and if I go to distort, we can sort of add a turbulent displace to the whole scene, but obviously this is way too much, so I will set the size to 35 and maybe amount to 15, maybe just increase the size, set this to maybe 25 or actually just 20. And as this scene and sort of the camera progresses, I want to animate this out, so I will set a keyframe for the amount at 20, and maybe at around second 3 I want this to be completely turned off. So now it's starting off with just a little bit of displacement, and it just fades out as the camera flies out. So this is how I created the original effect. Just make sure to check out the original example over here and see exactly how all the settings are. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more tutorials, and I will see you next time.